What difference will using a trauma-informed approach have on the children or youth in my care? Why would I change this approach?
A person should use the trauma-informed approach so that you don't cause more trauma. It's very tricky. You don't always see trauma, right? You don't always see what those triggers are. And so if you're using that trauma-informed approach, you're going to prevent an escalated situation.
Well, if we look at the basics of why someone is in treatment foster care, there's been some type of trauma. If we look at loss as a type of trauma, there it is. They've lost their home environment. The trauma exists because they just lost contact with their biological parents, their biological siblings, and that support network.
Trauma leaves such a lasting impact on a person's life. I mean, if you think back to any traumatic event in your own life, a car accident you might have had or something, when certain elements come into play, the sound, smell, a car screeches next to you, immediately you're taken back there and you're like, oh, and you're scared and it freaks you out, right? What more does it do to a child who doesn't know how to cope? So trauma is so all-encompassing in these kids' lives, and they don't even know how to say it. They don't know how to say, oh yeah, I was triggered by this situation. They don't know that. They just know I'm hurting, I'm upset, and why don't you get it? So as a parent, when you have a child who might have come from trauma, you need to be so intentional.
Using trauma-informed practices, what can I say and how can I say it to help this young person grow instead of further hindering them?
So for each child, it's kind of day to day, right? There was one moment in a therapy session. This kiddo we were tossing a ball around outside of therapy, and it was the therapist, me, and that child. And so as we're tossing the ball around, something about that repetitive movement, something about just being able to play and be kind of made him break down, and he was hugging and crying and just really having an emotional moment. And I felt in that moment, it felt really successful, like, okay, we're doing this, we're getting through to him, this is working. So that felt really successful. Let's work on this together. You have something going on, it's okay, everybody does. Let's work on this together, and as a team, we'll move forward.